Troy was a boy who'd never known love. He thought himself awkward and clumsy, a type that surely no person could ever want. Andy thought herself cursed, destined for a life alone with no hope of a romantic salvation. When the two first met, it was as if the very heavens opened, and peering in, they could see their lives play out, with them standing side by side for the whole of it. They saw children and pets, birthdays and yard work. They saw hundreds of seasons come and go. Also, they saw 13 short-lived pay subscriptions to Entertainment Weekly, which totally sucked for them because they only wanted a couple of free issues. When the two returned to their senses, there was no question in either mind. They embraced. As they stood there holding one another, they forgot loneliness. They forgot all despair and isolation.
You smell like 1,000 fresh cantaloupes.
Love began to grow. It was as if their two hearts were of opposing polarities, drawn together so tightly by a force neither of them could even begin to comprehend. They wed soon thereafter. And though their wedding was full of joy and love, the day it fell upon was a dark one indeed. In the future, history books would allocate entire chapters to this dismal day. Chapter headings would call it by varied names. Miserable Monday, Malady Monday, August the 21st, and sometimes just Monday.
So I could use them to literally fill your heart forever, forever.
Scientists had managed, in an attempt to find a cure, to pump a dying dyslexic full of a particularly viral strain of an airborne pathogen. The intent behind it was only for good, maybe with a touch of curiosity. But out of honorable intentions can be born unspeakable horrors. The contaminant merged with the dyslexia and then took to the air. Thousands would die. The plague tore through the city, leaving even the smallest of children completely unable to read their own names. Washington Post subscriptions dropped by 11% overnight. A panic grew in the city. Riots and looting followed soon after.
Why can't I read that? Why can't I?
It got to the point where those as yet unaffected by the sickness refused to go outdoors without first covering every possible orifice. Troy was among these, and he was wise to keep himself so protected. But one day, as he waited for the bus, that robot bird from the Silverhawk swooped in and scratched at Troy's face with its razor-like talons, tearing his medical mask, then flying high into the clouds. Troy wanted to run home that very second, but a full day's work loomed ahead of him, and also he only had dial-up in his apartment, so the work internet was much better. When the city bus came, Troy stepped onto it slowly. He grimaced every time he heard a phlegm-filled cough. He cringed whenever the moan of a sickly man would reach his ears. What Troy hadn't yet realized was that without a mask covering his nose and mouth, inhalation of the contaminant was unavoidable. Also, the germs got in through his open-face wound, too. And also, maybe he caught it from touching someone who was really, really gross. However the sickness entered in, the symptoms were immediate. By the time he stepped off the bus, his sensibility was replaced by fever.
Get it, Joe, bus driver lady!
He hunched over in incredible pain. And then he collapsed face first and was rushed to a hospital.
I'm sorry, ma'am. Your husband has got it. Real bad. He can only do his alphabet up to G. In an hour, he'll only know to D. By tonight, he'll be limited to K. D to K. Is that the right order?
W-O-K-L-C-V-E.
Troy lay there in a state of delirium. His mind would wander off to its farthest reaches. Sometimes it would glimpse the future. Mostly he saw Andy sitting alone at his aging grave, year after year. Oh, how he loved her.
Andy, I want you to marry after I'm gone. Don't live your life alone. So let's get you a divorce.
Andy looked at Troy with love in her eyes. And although she reviled at the thought of divorcing her dying husband, she knew it was his withering neurons that made him suggest such a horrible thing. She didn't wish to cause him strain.
Whatever you say, Sugar Lamb. How do you suggest we do so?
Well, here, in a hospital, to marry one needs a hospital priest. I would suppose that for the opposite, maybe one needs a Satanist or something.
Yes, we've got one of them all the way down on the left. But you better wait, he's ceremonying about now.
What did she just say? Did she just say there's a Satanist on hospital staff?
But it was too late. As spirit left body, Troy floated upwards for what seemed like ages. He floated through roofs,
Oh no!
through clouds,
I'm a ghost now!
through blue sky and space,
Look out, everybody!
and then for some reason he rose through some roofs again.
This is totally deja vu!
Right after that, he found himself standing before a most brilliant white light. An angel blocked his immediate passage. The being seemed acquainted with Troy and welcomed him. His job apparently was to answer any questions the dead might have before pointing them on toward him. Troy would only ask two.
Sir, will you tell me please, what will happen to Andy?
I could Google it.
I got it. Okay.
Typing on a BlackBerry. Is Andy spelled with a Y?
That's mine. It's 3 E's, actually. No, you're the setter. You're supposed to set. You're not supposed to score. Setters don't score. You're supposed to set.
Ah, she's one of those. Yes. Here it is. She marries again. She marries again, and she's very happy.
Good. That's really, really good.
Troy really was happy to hear the news. He pondered a moment, then asked his second question.
But to whom?
To Emilio Estevez. They met in an online rodeo. I don't know what that is.
Troy didn't comprehend the news he was hearing. At first, the news that Andy was happy was enough. But as he began to quiver and shake, it became clear to his mind that he could not bear to see his sweet wife in the arms of someone that had so convincingly played the questionable part of a tomfool in the Breakfast Club. Troy began to think about how he'd only been dead a few days, and he couldn't help but wonder how could Andy move on so soon. It festered inside him, and although highly unusual, he actually decided that death wouldn't do. He rushed in the direction from whence he came.
And Angel, don't change for anybody.
Troy returned with a speed almost unthinkable, stopping only when his imagination made him vomit ghost puke. He arrived in no time at all. His timing was perfect. The wedding was taking place at that very moment. Troy rushed through the thick wooden doors into the chapel screaming, but nobody heard him. He hadn't a body to shout with. Frantically, he tore the spirit from a man sitting nearby, assuming a clumsy control.
And as these two people stand before us, to marry with a biblical intent.
Andy! Andy!
Troy tried to rush closer to the stage, but his new legs were bumbling. He stumbled, then crawled towards the front. Andy turned.
Andy, it's me! It's Troy, my sweetums! It's your husband! It's your sugar nubs!
Whoa, 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 whoa. This ain't Denise, Charlie.
Troy? Is that Troy?
Andy! My Andy!
My Andy!
My Andy!
My Andy!
My Andy!
My Andy!
The story of Troy and Andy was calamitous
My
indeed.
Andy!
'Twas filled with naught but sickness and death, allowing only a brief window of comforting love. That window shattered catastrophically. Where once was harbored warmth, now only coldness remained. But perhaps the greatest tragedy of all was that Andy had been dyslexic all along.